afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Melbourne Holocaust Museum. My name is Brianne Fallon and I have the deep honour of being the CEO of this remarkable museum. Before we continue, if I could please ask everybody to turn their mobile phones onto silent. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to elders both past and present. I also want to acknowledge the elders of our community, the Holocaust survivors that established this museum, who still speak here and ensure that we are a place of truth-telling, memory and education. It's my great honour to introduce to you this afternoon Wladyslaw Bartoszewski, Minister for Foreign Affairs. He holds a PhD in Cultural Anthropology from the University of Cambridge and an MA in Anthropology and History from the University of Warsaw. Having completed his PhD, he worked as an independent research fellow at the University of Oxford and the University of Warwick. A CEO and board member at international financial institutions in Poland, he was also a deputy CEO and board member at Exetel SA. Wladyslaw Bartoszewski has been at the head of the Wladyslaw Bartoszewski Chair at Collegium Civitas in Warsaw since 2015. An MP in the Polish Sejm since 2019, he was a member of the Polish Coalition Parliamentary Caucus, a deputy chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and a member of the Energy, Climate and State Assets Committee in the 9th term, re-elected as deputy chair at the Foreign Affairs Committee in the 10th term. Welcome and thank you so much for visiting us this afternoon. Over to you, Minister.
First of all, I'd like to very much to thank the leadership of the Melbourne Holocaust Memorial and the Holocaust Museum for inviting me and organizing this lecture. Melbourne is a city where the memory of the Holocaust is very much alive because it's kept by the survivors and their descendants, and it's where the heart of the Polish community of Australia beats strongly. I speak with gratitude, not only as a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs responsible for the Jewish diaspora. I don't deal with Israel, but all the other Jews in the world are mine. Or at least I'm responsible for them in Poland. But also I'm responsible for Polish-Jewish relations. Strictly speaking, I have been dealing with that since the 80s. In 1985, I was one of the co-founders of the Institute for Polish-Jewish Studies in Oxford, and the Institute publishes an annual called Polin, the Journal of Polish-Jewish Studies, of which we published 37 volumes so far. I was a deputy editor for a while, and then I had to go to other duties, but I'm still on board. And these volumes are roughly 500 pages a year, so it's unfortunately it doesn't have much reach. It concentrates on the academic community, so it's not a popular kind of book. It's strictly an academic book, but it's the peculiarity of it is that its editorial board is pretty equally divided between the Poles, the Jews, the Polish Jews, the Israeli Jews, foreign Poles, I mean, living in different places, and it's something which I recommend for your libraries. I also speak personally as a son of my father was a prisoner of Auschwitz, from which he was released as he was taken age 18 without any previous engagement in anything dealing with the opposition. He started and he was reclaimed by the Red Cross, and then he started to work in the opposition. And then he co-founded the Council for Aid to Jews Żegota, Much later he became a righteous among nations, and he was a foreign minister of Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs and an honorary citizen of Israel. He had a friend, Shimon Peres, who was also a Polish Jew, and he was at the time also a foreign minister. And Peres joked, Israel is such a lucky country, such a small place, and has 2 foreign ministers. Shimon Peres was unusual because he was born in Poland, or what was then Poland, and his family was fiercely Zionist, so he did not speak Yiddish, they learned Hebrew, which is highly unusual in a pre-war Poland, to be the Hebrew speaker, not the Yiddish speaker. So it's so my visit to Australia comes at a particularly challenging moment in the global geopolitics. Difficult and dangerous, unfortunately, overthrowing the post-war order of relative peace. Poland knows it very well, as for over 4 years the war rages just across our borders, which Ukrainians, soldiers and civilians falling victims of Russian aggression. As the late Polish historian and journalist and my family friend Marian Turski said at a ceremony commemorating 75th anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, he said then, the Holocaust did not fall from the sky. This truth concerns the whole world, including Europe and Australia, unfortunately. Authoritarian rule, hate speech against minorities, disinformation and populism. Unfortunately, again, many supporters, regardless of religion, race and age. Australia has not been immune to this trend in recent months. We have witnessed repeated acts of anti-Semitism, the fire set beneath a synagogue in Melbourne, threats to Jewish schools, vandalism and attacks. A few months ago, Australian and Jewish Australians were brutally murdered by terrorists at the Bondi beach. These anti-Semitism acts are not isolated and are creating the sense of unease, of tension and growing threats to the community. Ugly tendencies, even though we have agreed and we have promised that they will not be reborn, never again. And never again is now. We are witnessing manipulation of social sentiment, the fomenting of anti-Semitic attitudes, and I want to express for the Melbourne Holocaust Museum for your continuous work in presenting the truth. History is important, especially in the context of educating future generations. Many survivors made it to Australia, and they have really deserved the truth about their experiences. The trouble is that the younger generation doesn't seem to be particularly interested in the truth. They're interested in what they are given in the social media, and that is very far from the reality. As you well know, Australia became, after the Second World War, the most important destination for Jewish survivors, apart from Palestine. The survivors of the Shoah, who arrived here as DPs. Between 47 and the 50s, thousands of Jews, mainly from Poland, Hungary, Germany, and other parts of Eastern Europe, migrated under assisted passage schemes organized by the Australian government in cooperation with international refugee agencies. And today, the Australian Jewish community, especially here in Melbourne, is considered one of the most vibrant in the diaspora, largely due to the resilience and contributions of these post-war survivors. By the 60s and beyond, Holocaust survivors and their descendants have become an integral part of Australian society. They played a central role in transforming the Jewish community from a largely Anglo-Jewish population into a more diverse European-influenced diaspora. Their legacy includes strong communal institutions, Holocaust education program, and lasting cultural imprint in Australian multicultural life. So let me say a few words, because that's supposed to be topic of my talk, about the Jewish life in Poland after 1989, after the fall of communism. There were very few Jews left in Poland in 1989. First of all, 90% of them were murdered during the Shoah. Then the Jews migrated into Palestine, not without difficulty, after the war. Then there was a small migration in '56, but that was largely linked to those Jews who served in the state apparatus, and the Communist Party divided themselves into pro-Jewish and anti-Jewish, and some of them left. But that was a small group. The bigger group, maybe 30,000, left, forced or encouraged or induced to leave in 1968, and they went largely to England, Sweden, the United States, and relatively few to the State of Israel. Poland broke diplomatic relations with the State of Israel after the Six-Day War, and we did not resume that relations until Poland became independent of communist rule, so the relations were re-established in 1990. The Jewish life in Poland before 1990 was very timid. Jews did not advertise the origin. Yes, there was a Jewish theater playing in Yiddish in Warsaw. There was even a Jewish newspaper, Volksstimme, but there was not much of a Jewish life. People in the second half of 1970s, the young people, the university students, decided to show disapproval of the communist policy by, for instance, participating in the cleaning up and restoring Jewish cemeteries, which was kind of politically neutral, but something of use. So that was quite a popular thing. And we of course had throughout the period a social cultural association of Jews in Poland, which started in 1950s, the oldest institution of the social institution of Jews in Poland, existing now. As it is typical with the Jewish life, and indeed with the Polish life, we've got different Jewish organizations now. This one is a right-wing Jewish organization. We've got a left-wing Jewish organization, because that's how the world works. I happily am friendly with both of them. So I'm not going to get into details. It comes 1989, and Poland is becoming completely free in 1990. We've then established a variety of Jewish organizations, Association of the Children of the Holocaust, Association of Jewish Veterans and people harmed in the World War II, Polish Union of Jewish Students, Jewish Forum, Jewish Historical Institute Association, which started later the Museum of the History of Polish Jew, which became Poliny in 2014. We got a first Rabbi, Michael Shudrich, who came from New York 30 years ago and is now still the chief rabbi of Poland, although of course now he has a competitor from the Chabad, because you can't have just one, you have to have many Jewish opinions on whatever. But this is, after '89, people raise questions about their identity and ethnicity, and the subjects of Jews, of Jewish history, Jewish identity was officially taken up again. We created, in those years, Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw, the Galicia Jewish Museum in Krakow, and the Jewish cultural life started to flourish, including the Festival of Jewish Culture, in Krakow, which is very popular. We had got lots of material help from especially Jewish foundations, Ronald Lauder, or as they call it in America, Lauder Foundation, Thoby Foundation, and others. Now, what I can say, I don't want to mention this or that body. What I would like to say more is what happened after 89. First of all, in 1990, we re-established links with Israel. We then participate immediately after helping with the Operation Bridge. Bridge was the way to move Russian Jews to Israel. Russia, the Soviet Union still, refused to let them go directly, so they would fly to Warsaw, were then moved to a different plane and flew via Vienna to Tel Aviv. I was aware of this, that it was not publicly advertised because the Soviets insisted on keeping it quiet. I was aware of this because my father was then the ambassador to Vienna, and he, together with the ambassador to the OSCE from Israel in Vienna, cooperated in moving those hundreds of thousands of Jews from one country to another without attracting much knowledge, but with very heavy security. I can now say, because it makes no difference. Of course, the ambassador of Israel in OSCE Vienna was a fully fledged officer in the Mossad, and that helped to move this stuff efficiently. He's much retired now, so it doesn't really matter. And then we've realized that there was the desire in both countries to re-establish relations in a full scale. The first thing what happened is that we established very close links between our intelligence communities. People don't talk about it or didn't talk about it, but that was very solid foundation, because we exchanged information and provided mutual help to do various things together. And that relationship has maintained till now. So it's not public much, but it's important, because the deep state in Israel understands the value of that type of cooperation. The Jewish matter started to be very interesting. The people studied it. We had cultural exchanges with visits and so forth. Irrespective who was running, which government was running in Poland and which government was running in things in Israel, it was very close. At some stage, Poland started to emerge. In 1990, we were a bankrupt country. We had horrendous foreign debt, inflation around 500% plus, and we were not a particularly attractive place to visit. But 10 years later, and now we are 20th biggest economy in the world, not yet official, but practicing member of the G20. We are now participating in under the American presidency in the G20. So lots of Israelis discovered Polish roots. At the moment, since this 1990, 220,000 Israelis took Polish passports. And we estimate that eligible for Polish passports are remaining 600,000 Israelis. And they took it for practical reasons. After 2004, we joined the EU. It makes it easier to travel. But they took it for some sentimental reasons, because they felt Polish. And the younger generation took it and uses it for trade reasons or commercial reasons, because we've got masses of Israeli coming to shop in Poland, because Israel has traditionally had quite heavy duties on anything brought into the country, and so they come and shop and go back. So it's a kind of trade tourism. And be it as it may, we've had a very good relations, also because Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has been a Prime Minister for a very long time, irrespective of what you may think about his politics, he always underlines that his father was born in Warsaw and lived till he was 102. And he always says, I'm a Polish Jew, and he created something which never existed before. He instituted exchanges, consultations between Israeli and Polish governments, which consisted of 1 year. Netanyahu came with 8-9 ministers of his government to Poland, and then the Polish Prime Minister would take some ministers and flew to Israel for negotiations. This was quite unusual. 1 year, Netanyahu felt quite linked to Poland. 1 year, he said, I want to have a full session of the Knesset in Krakow. Now, anybody who knows Krakow, which is a medieval town with very narrow streets, very crowded, I talked to the head of our security, and he said, over my dead body I will allow 120 members of the Knesset to come to Krakow because I cannot provide adequate protection. And if any of them, God forbid, dies, I'm not going to have the responsibility for a dead member of the Knesset under my jurisdiction. Netanyahu nevertheless prevailed and brought 60 members of the Knesset to Krakow for a meeting. Because the relationship with, on a personal level was quite good. Commercially, academically, it was very exciting, and of course it was very good politically. All things collapsed very much in 2018. It was a new government, new Polish right-wing government, which passed a law called the Law about Institute for National Remembrance, which had clauses which in effect punished people for publishing historical analysis or research on the Shoah, which would not please the Polish government. That was an absolute and total disaster, which was strongly opposed in Poland by academic people and some normal people, because it was, in fact, it was a peculiar scheme to get rid of the Prime Minister. One of the ministers, Minister of Justice, decided if we pass this law, it will really bring down the government, so especially the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister didn't realize that, what was in it. Thankfully, the leader of the party, who was not the Prime Minister but was leading the party, realized very quickly, being told by the Americans that that will not do. So something had to be done. And here, I must say that the person who came to the rescue was Prime Minister Netanyahu, because he wanted to maintain links with Poland, so he delegated 2 people to negotiate. I happen to know there was Yakov Nagel, head of national security for Netanyahu, and a very famous lawyer, Ciechanover, both Polish Jews. Nagel from Warsaw. His parents were from Warsaw, but and they negotiated the change of this law, which was passed quite quickly, and removed this particular article, which was very contentious. So things have improved. Then, of course, things became more difficult because we had Israeli government change, and we had some ministers of Israeli government who went the other way. And we had a period of few years of very difficult relations. Polish ambassador left Tel Aviv, and it was a freeze. Thankfully, in the last few years, we managed to revive this link, and we have more or less normal relations, ambassadors in both places, and also negotiated a new agreement about the school children from Israel being able to visit Poland. Well, they were always able, but the change which occurred was that for the first time they do not come with armed guards, because Poland said we can guard them ourselves, we don't need your help, which we can. And secondly, they are encouraged to visit Polish schools, so they would have interaction, because if they don't see anybody from Poland and only go to Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka, they don't get an image of Poland as it is now. And they are encouraged to visit 2 musea out of the list of 20, whichever they want. Of course, one of them is always Pauline, and another one. So that was a good agreement. Unfortunately, things started to go sideways very much after the October 7th, because we're lucky because we never had any anti-Semitic incidents in Poland. In the last few years, I can think of 2, one of which was somebody threw a Molotov cocktail on a Nożyk synagogue in Warsaw and was apprehended in less than 24 hours. And there was a sign saying we will not tolerate that stuff. We had an MP 3 years ago, must have been, who disrupted the Hanukkah ceremony in Polish Parliament. It has to be said that in Polish Parliament the Hanukkah candles are lit every year. But we removed his immunity, and he faces 7 criminal charges. After the October 7, however, the younger part of the population decided that for whatever reason, the guilty party are the Israelis because of the Gaza Strip invasion, and therefore they are going to be pro-Palestinian, and the distinction between Hamas and Palestine is somewhat blurred, because I must admit that unfortunately they are pretty uneducated in this respect, or completely uneducated in this respect. When they sing from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they do not understand that it means from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River there will be no Jews. Because it simply, they don't know any history. And this is something which we face. However, Jewish life as such is not, strangely enough, particularly affected, because as I was talking today at lunch, you can wear a kippah and nobody's going to attack you. We don't have, the synagogue is not heavily guarded because it doesn't have to be. The Jewish institutions are not, Jewish Museum, Jewish Institute, Jewish Historical Institute in the center of Warsaw is not guarded because it doesn't have to be. The Jews have the music festivals in Krakow every year, and we don't have any problems. However, there is an issue of this, and the Israelis come. Lately it was a problem, but that's related to the war in the Middle East. The flights were not flying, but although you could fly to Warsaw via the United Arab Emirates, which kept the flights throughout to Israel. I was going to Israel on a conference, and the flights were stopped, and the Israeli ambassador said, well, why don't you fly through Abu Dhabi? Because they are very friendly with Israelis. So I would say there's a new phenomenon, and there's an entirely new phenomenon. This year I had to arrange special protection because we had 60,000 Hasidim going to visit the Tzaddik. And 60,000 is a large number of people to take care of. So I was asked to make sure that nothing happened, and we managed to do that. There are still quite a few Jewish delegations coming, and tourists and so on. The sad thing is that the Jewish school children have a problem visiting their counterparts in Polish schools because lots of younger generation do not want to see the Israelis because the Israelis are responsible for what's happening in Gaza. This is a sad, this is a new phenomenon which started 3 years ago, more or less 3.5 years ago. And this is something which, of course, worries us. But we, of course, maintain contacts when the state of Israel, irrespectively. The Jewish life is a peculiar one because all of a sudden the number of Jews, which were maybe few thousands in the 90s, now tens of thousands acknowledge that they're Jewish, and they participate in normal social, cultural, and political life. But we also started having people from Western Europe and from the United States, for different reasons, who want to move to Poland. And quite a few Orthodox Jews moved to Poland to have a purely Orthodox life in Poland because they said that's what we used to have before. And actually our origins, especially the Hasidim, they said they are from here. They're not from the Eretz Israel, they are from here. I mean, Hasidism started in the territory of Polish, the Lithuanian Republic. So this is a completely new phenomenon. And I've also mentioned, I retained very close contacts with the American Jewish Committee, with the World Jewish Congress, with Bnei Brit, and so on. And I meet people from America who said, I want to have a Polish passport, not because I want to live in Poland, but because I feel Polish. Yes, I'm American Jew, but I feel Polish. I'm a Pole. And it's a very strange interaction. We are very keen to maintain this because as the people who do research on the Jewish history can say, 75% of all Jews now alive in the world have their roots in Poland. They may not know it. Russian Jews would say they are Russian. There were no Russian Jews. Until 1972, there were no Russian Jews, apart from a handful who, like a kind of Hofjude, who lived in Petersburg. But there were a handful. And the rest lived in the Pale of Settlement, which was taken in 1772 by Russia from Poland, and then the Russians didn't know what to do with them. So they didn't let them to live in Russia. Of course, they learned Russian over the time, but the Russian Jews are not such as Russian Jews per se. So they're kind of both. Anyway, it's a big topic. I don't want to bore you, so I think I stop and I'll answer questions because I don't know what you want to know.
We have time for 2 or 3 questions. My colleague Maya will come with a microphone. There's one straight at the back there, Maya, a first question.
Regarding population, what is the Jewish population in the current years?
There was no migration from Poland in 1962. I'm sorry. There was a big migration after 56 and after 68. The Jews could have come here in 62, but they were not a wave. The wave was after 53 and after 68 particularly. They, of course, and the Jews, of course, migrated to Australia as well as in other countries, but they would have been individuals, there might have been a few families, but mass migration, I mean, about 30,000 was 68, few thousand after 56, and they went to various countries. I'm sorry I didn't mention Australia, but they usually went to somewhere and then further. So first, for instance, they went to England and then to the United States, or then further. It's not possible to establish how many Jews lived in Poland after 1968 because the definition of Jew can vary. Strictly speaking, if your mother was Jewish, you are Jewish. But if you were secular, left-wing leaning, non-religious at all, and didn't particularly want to talk about your mother or your links, you were not counted in any statistics. It's very difficult to establish. And after 68, especially, not everybody who was Jewish wanted to talk about their Jewishness. It was not particularly popular with the party which ran the country. The estimates was kind of maximum 2,000 or 3,000 maximum. Jews who identified themselves as Jewish, who were in some Jewish cultural institutions, like the one I mentioned, which lasted since 1950, but it was obvious that there are very many more who are of Jewish origin, maybe don't manifest it, but they are aware of this. A strange phenomenon which occurred after 68 was that many Jews, especially those who participated in a kind of student rebellion, which was nothing to do with the West European student rebellion. There were completely different causes and different symptoms, and they were not anti-establishment, get rid of the old generation, and we have hippies or whatever. A completely different attitude. And these people were kicked out of universities because they were active politically, rather than necessarily being Jewish, because non-Jews also were kicked out of universities. And the only university which took them in so they could finish their studies was the Catholic University of Lublin, where the Pope John Paul II was teaching as well. Because they said, okay, we'll protect you. This was a very peculiar phenomenon. The church protected people who became famous political activists and journalists like Adam Michnik, who became the editor of the most popular newspaper after 1990 in Poland. And he was protected by the church. It's a very peculiar dynamics, because the church was anti-communist, and these Jews were anti-communist, and they formed, Michnik wrote a book called Kościół, Lewica, Dialog. The church, the left, the dialogue. It's a very unusual. So then, and of course, once you, after 1990, when it was perfectly normal to say, well, I'm of Jewish origin, then the number grew, and again, there are plenty of people who have Jewish origins, and some of them are not conscious, and some of them don't particularly care, and some of them don't want to talk about it particularly, but I think it's safe to say that we've got, not in a religious sense necessarily, because mixed marriages were perfectly common, so I'm saying 30,000, 40,000, I mean, there's no statistic because nobody talks about it, but personally I know plenty, but that's anecdotal, that's not a scientific measure of any kind. But what changed is that we have now, when we had the anti-Hamas marches, which after the pro-Hamas youth or pro-Palestinian youth, they don't see the difference, started, we did have two big marches anti-Hamas, and I participated in both in Warsaw, and I had representatives of all political parties, with the exception of the extreme right, and whom I never thought were necessarily Jewish, although clearly some of them were. But we thought you should show that so you all of a sudden say, he is marching, maybe he is Jewish. And in some cases they were Jewish. But it was not something which, therefore it's impossible to estimate. But we've got this, now this influence of, as I say, of Orthodox, which is not quite sure how to deal with this, because of course they can come and stay, but of course this life from pre-war Hasidic life is gone, but they want to recreate it, and good for them. But we don't have tzadikini. So I haven't yet managed to get one.
We have time for probably one quick one from Henry, and then we'll have to move on.
Thank you for your dialogue.
Just wait for the microphone from Maya, Henry, so we can all hear. Thank you.
Thank you for your dialogue about Poland. I was actually born in Poland. I came here in 1948. And my question really, probably I'd like to go back. I have a Polish passport because it seems as if there's less anti-Semitism there than there is here. But the question I'm asking is about Polish property restitution. Many Jews fled Poland and left behind their background, their homes, and I was one of them. So I'm just wondering if there's any furtherance in the application or benefits that you can get from restitution.
That is a difficult question because we paid a compensation historically towards the Jewish community and restored all the historical buildings, including the synagogues and other things, cemeteries, everything, to the Jewish community, and basically anybody who had papers could claim the ownership through the administrative steps within a certain period of time. The laws passed by the communists in the early 50s deprived people of private property irrespective of their nationality. So if you are a Catholic Pole and you lost a house, you still lost a house. And you can do nothing about it. There are exceptions. If you had all paperwork, which of course most Jews do not have, for reasons which are obvious, you could, on an individual basis, you could reclaim it. Otherwise, there is, after a certain passage of time, nobody can reclaim it, and that goes equally the same for non-Jewish Poles, because people said we cannot reclaim stuff after 50 or 60 years because there has to be some kind of cutoff point, because otherwise people live in a house and they don't know if they can live in this house or is it going to be taken away from them. So the law is passed that there is a period of time and then that's it. The people who were most severely affected by that were small landowners who lost everything and they can claim nothing. And the house which belonged to my grandfather before the war was taken, I can do nothing about it. So it's unfortunately there is now, apart from communal property which was returned or in kind, which not everybody wants to have because you have to maintain it. So we maintain the Jewish cemeteries. The state pays for that because there is no money for that. So we do it because it's our heritage as well. So some properties were claimed by people who had the papers, and others it's now extremely difficult. That I agree with.
I'm so sorry, we're over time this afternoon, but Minister, I just wanted to thank you so much for spending time with us and for your address this afternoon. A small gift on behalf of the museum.
Sorry, I should have played it differently. I should have said to talk for 5 minutes and then you will have time for questions, because I knew that it would be much more interesting, and because of course I don't know what you would like to know, and it's a vast topic and we could talk for hours, because it's I mean, we, like it or not, we share about 1,050 years common history, and there's quite a lot has happened in that period. So lots of bad things, but also lots of good things. There's one thing I would like to leave with you at the end. I maintain close links with the Jewish historians in Israel and elsewhere. And the common view amongst them is that Israel could be successfully recreated in 1948 because for 200 years plus, a Polish Jewry had a parliament of 4 lands where they ran their affairs, and therefore they basically continue. They had experience of how to run administrative, civil law, family stuff, educational stuff. The only thing they couldn't do is defense and foreign affairs. The rest was done within the Jewish community, and the Polish kings did not interfere. And they said that helped us to keep this certain sense of institutions going, and that's why the State of Israel was recreated with much less pain than it would have been otherwise. So I'd like to say this is our small contribution to the, well, and we had a big contribution with people, because after all, Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky and quite a few others were from Poland, so they didn't like each other, but they were from Poland.
Thank you again, Minister. For the remainder of the afternoon, we have a film to share with you, which has been shared by our guests this afternoon. It is entitled The Granddaughter and has been directed by Masha Makarova and produced by Warsaw Ghetto Museum. This film follows Dr Anna Braude-Heller, Chief Physician of the Bersohn and Bauman Children's Hospital, and the question of why she chose to remain in the Warsaw Ghetto when she might have been able to escape. In this deeply moving documentary, her granddaughter, Ewa Heller-Ekblad, returns to Warsaw at the age of 85 in the search to answers for those questions.